Bad situation got worse and worse over time until their safety margins were essentially non-existent. It was more luck than skill that was protecting the people of Ohio. The good news is that problem was detected before the accident occurred, so as expensive as the fixes were, at least they were done without the human cost.
The boric acid ate away at the carbon steel of the reactor vessel head, eventually eating out a cavity about the size of a pineapple, and managed to eat away the entire thickness of the reactor vessel head, which is approximately 6 inches, until it reached a stainless steel liner on the underside of the reactor vessel head.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission looked at Davis-Besse and looked specifically to answer the question of what could we have done to prevent this from happening. They came up with a list of 49 items that they could and should have done to prevent Davis-Besse. They're now implemented all but one of those items, and that one's going to be done in the near future. That will lessen the likelihood that there's another Davis-Besse or another surprise like Davis-Besse down the road, which is good. You got to learn from your mistakes.
Our investigation led to the largest fine that we have ever issued against a utility.
The industry realizes, like I said, that safe operation is efficient operation. So when something like Davis-Besse happens and they're shut down for a few years, and that's a lot of money every day, the industry is going to react and do whatever it can to make sure that doesn't happen to them.
After incidents like Davis-Besse and 3 Mile Island, a lot of public support for nuclear power has been lost. And often, when energy companies have wanted to build new nuclear plants, they have met a great deal of resistance.
To the Atomic Safety and Licensing Board and the public, I am speaking for my friends who choose not to speak. But these hearings are not for the purpose of hearing and weighing public sentiment. The NRC has held 60 licensing hearings to date, and not once has a license been refused. This country is proceeding with the building of nuclear plants, and yet we do not have a program for the safe disposal of nuclear waste.
So in the 70s, a utility would request a construction license. There would be an ASLB hearing on the license. Once construction was completed, the utility had to come back to the NRC and request an operating license. And there would again be another hearing. So it was a drawn-out process that did not provide a great deal of certainty for either the utilities, the NRC, or the parties that were opposed to these licenses. It did not work as well as had been hoped. There are different pieces that can be put together in a much more efficient way. One of the pieces is a certified reactor design. As we talked about earlier, there are 4 designs that have already been certified by the NRC as essentially safe to build and operate in the United States.
So what do these new plants look like?
As a leader in the industry and somebody whose business is now solely focused on nuclear, we've felt all along that an important aspect of this business would be an eventual renaissance of nuclear. Therefore, we continue to invest in the AP600 following along and then the AP1000, because we did see that at some point issues like environment, safety, and economics would come back in nuclear's favor. Therefore, we've kept a pretty strong investment into these designs, and it's now starting to pay off for us.
The established design of the AP1000 offers 3 distinct advantages over other designs: unequaled safety, economic competitiveness, and improved and more efficient operations. Simplicity may not be the first word that comes to mind when thinking about nuclear power plants, but the AP1000 is different. It uses simplified and advanced passive safety systems to an unprecedented extent. But the effectiveness of the components has been demonstrated through years of operations and testing. The AP1000 harnesses natural forces, such as gravity, convection, and condensation, to maintain a passive safety system that kicks in automatically. Reducing the need for human intervention greatly reduces the potential for human error. In the unlikely case of a problem, the steadfast rules of nature take over, naturally cooling the core. The AP1000's modular design integrates the power of nature to ensure safety standards that are designed to meet the NRC single failure criteria. In fact, the AP1000 is designed to be more than 100 times safer than already safe operating systems. The AP1000 can be built in just 36 months from the first concrete pour to the loading of fuel. This is at least 2 to 3 years quicker than the construction of other plants.
So even if the new plants can be built faster and safer, what about the safety of nuclear waste shipments?
There have been more than 3,000 shipments of used nuclear fuel in the United States and more than 21,000 shipments of used nuclear fuel internationally. All of these shipments have taken place in containers designed to meet Nuclear Regulatory Commission or International Atomic Agency Commission standards. There's never been a release of the radioactive contents of a used nuclear fuel container during shipment. This record of safety is unparalleled when compared to other hazardous materials transportation shipments.
The first layer of protection is the packaging itself for the used fuel rods. Nuclear energy is generated using fuel pellets made of compressed uranium. These pellets are assembled into columns and inserted into zirconium alloy tubes. The tubes are sealed with end plugs to form a fuel rod. These fuel rods are then grouped into fuel assemblies. When the fuel is changed in the reactor, used fuel rods are cooled in steel-lined pools before transport by truck or by train in protective containers to safe storage facilities. When transported by truck, the shipping containers have a stainless steel basket that holds the fuel assembly firmly in place. 2 thick cylinders of steel surround the basket and form a cavity that is filled with lead which shields radiation. A steel lid then seals this cylinder. The outermost layer is a thick shielding material that prevents any release of radiation. The fuel assembly is then inserted into the container and the package is sealed securely with another steel lid. This sealed container is then carefully lowered onto a specially fitted flatbed truck and secured in place. Special impact limiters are installed as an additional safety precaution to absorb energy from any possible collision during transportation. Finally, a tarp or screen is added to cover the container en route. Rail containers are similar to truck containers but carry a heavier load, so they can hold more fuel assemblies. Used nuclear fuel is transported in certified containers. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has certified numerous container designs, which fall into 2 broad categories. The first incorporates 3 layers of metal, lead sandwiched between 2 layers of steel, and in the other certified design, the fuel is contained within 9 to 15 inches of steel. As a safety precaution, all rail transporters are required to have buffer cars between the used fuel cars and other rail cars. It is likely that most used fuel shipments to a federal disposal facility will travel by rail in the future.
Designers of used fuel containers will use both physical tests and computer modeling in order to show that the containers can withstand the hypothetical accident conditions.
The safety and strength of these container designs has been verified in numerous physical tests that far exceed regulatory requirements. These robust shipping containers are specially designed to withstand even the most extreme accident scenarios. Shipping containers have been loaded onto a truck that was crashed first at 60 miles per hour and then at 80 miles per hour into a 700-ton concrete wall. They have been broadsided by a 120-ton locomotive traveling at 80 miles per hour. Another physical test involved dropping containers in a 30-foot free fall onto steel-reinforced concrete, comparable to hitting a concrete slab head-on at 120 miles an hour. They've been dropped onto a 6-inch diameter spike, and the containers have been burned in a pool of aviation fuel for 90 minutes at temperatures of more than 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The result in each case, there were no ruptures or significant damage to the used fuel containers themselves. Although dented and charred, the containers remained totally intact to protect the used fuel they would carry.
In the year 2000, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission released a report that re-examined the risk of used nuclear fuel shipments. In fact, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission found that using the most current analytical techniques and modeling, that the risks of used nuclear fuel shipments are even smaller than they thought 20 years ago.
The industry also incorporates safety data from international studies. In tests involving a major propane gas explosion and a jet engine rotor traveling at near supersonic speed, again, the containers would have fully protected the fuel rods. Another facet of public safety involves the integrated planning process for shipments. This includes a coordinated approach among federal, state, and local officials. Federal authorities establish specific guidelines for the safest possible shipment of used fuel.
One of the first aspects of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's actions is to approve any route over which used nuclear fuel might travel, and examines these routes to make sure that the shipments will be secure. Armed escorts are required in urban areas. In addition, some states require escorts throughout their state.
State and local authorities issue permits to shippers, conduct safety inspections of trains and trucks, and coordinate emergency preparedness efforts.
DOE and other organizations have given us a lot of studies and have picked routes that has the minimal impact on large municipal areas and to bypass big cities. And I think that the key is to move this material safely from point A to point B.
State and local authorities carefully monitor shipping routes, including satellite tracking, so they will always know exactly where shipments are at any minute.
Used nuclear fuel is a solid material. It is not flammable and it cannot explode. In the event of a transportation accident, there would be no explosion as a result of the nuclear materials being present. In the event of a train accident involving a used nuclear transportation container, the containers are designed to withstand high temperature fires. In addition, the containers present a moving target, making them an unlikely choice for a terrorist attack.
As the country's plan for disposing of used nuclear fuel moves forward, the proven record of safe transportation of used nuclear fuel ensures the highest levels of protection to the public and the environment.
So where are we going to be shipping this material? Signs point to Yucca Mountain in Nevada, but many Nevadans don't want it there. Congresswoman Shelley Berkeley has been a critic of the Yucca Mountain project. I got a chance to talk with her Yucca legislative expert, David Cherry, literally in the halls of Congress.
So Congresswoman Berkeley opposes Yucca Mountain because she doesn't think that it can be done safely, and she also opposes Yucca Mountain because she doesn't believe that it's safe to transport nuclear waste from 43 states across the U.S. to a single location in Nevada, given the very real risk of an accident or a terrorist attack on a waste shipment. So those are the real reasons that she opposes it. She doesn't think it's safe, and she doesn't think that we ought to be moving the waste, given the risk.
The notion that you can just basically dump this waste has proven impracticable. Every attempt to bury radioactive waste has failed.
Jim, isn't it that they basically know that the length of time that this stuff will be in the ground and radioactive, that hole won't stay dry?
Yeah.
Right? The geologists have shown that, over periods of time, it floods, the water table comes up.
And so, yeah, in my personal opinion, I can't think of a better place to put it, in that it's away from as much water as you can get it away from, and it is in a remote, sparsely inhabited area. And I can understand why they don't want it there. But for example, if it's out east, on the outskirts of Buffalo, or anywhere else a nuclear plant currently is, there's a lot more risks involved than there are in a place like that.
Why can't these things just be stored in containers above ground?
And they can, and they are. That's where they are now.
But is that a long-term option? Why can't that be a long-term?
Well, indeed, and it can be a long-term option, and that's what we've made it by refusing to actually take action to put it in one place. I guess the argument would be similar to lots of people are saying break up ExxonMobil now and so on. There's economies of scale. Like ExxonMobil can search more efficiently for oil than a bunch of little companies could. And by the same token, if you need a high level of safeguards on these things, and you want to make sure that no terrorists sneak in and steal some plutonium, is it easier to staff 20 small places or one big one? Yeah. And also one big one in a remote area rather than an urban center where all kinds of other things might happen, like New Orleans, and go wrong. So in terms of the most secure location, in terms of keeping it secure over the long haul, it seems to me to be kind of a no-brainer. Get it off the surface, get it underground where the only access is through basically a tunnel, and get it someplace where you can have the soldiers around it 24/7 or whatever you need. The arguments against that, I've never quite understood, other than not in my backyard, which is, I think, the major reason that you see the people from Nevada protesting so vehemently.
The way that the industry and NEI envisions Yucca Mountain is that it's not, we're going, in the way it's designed, if you look at the preliminary design for the NRC, it's not just park the fuel there and forget about it. It's to continuously monitor it, for several hundred years, and make changes if necessary. So the point is to have it retrievable for a fairly long length of time.
If the Nuclear Energy Institute was so keen on nuclear waste, why don't they advocate keeping it at the sites where it's now produced? And why don't they say to the communities that are willing to host a new nuclear power plant, you should only do so if you're willing to say to us that we're perfectly comfortable with the idea that this waste may never leave our community, that perhaps this waste would stay in the community where it's produced for the next million years. That's what they're asking of Nevada. They want people in Nevada to play host to their nuclear waste for the next million years. Well, why shouldn't the communities where the waste was produced, why shouldn't there be a burden on them to play host to that waste? If they enjoyed the benefits of nuclear power, then why shouldn't they also bear the burden of having to deal with the nuclear waste?
Well, I don't think there are that many communities that actively solicited nuclear plants. 50s and 60s, we were okay with it, but it sort of got, I think they got cited in large part for reasons that were at a larger scale than community scale. So, like any comprehensive energy plan, it's really national issue. And as a consequence, I thoroughly agree that the communities that have the plants, if they've benefited from them, should help bear the cost. I think we all should. I think we're all using the electricity, and I think we should also bear the cost of the climate change from the use of fossil fuels. And that these things should be done in some sort of an equitable manner. There's no way Nevada should pay the cost of this, but if Nevada or somebody else makes the most sense in terms of isolating this, then basically, I'm sorry, they're being selfish to say it shouldn't come here. If that is the lowest risk for the country as a whole, I'm sorry, that's why the nuclear test site is right next door to Yucca Mountain, is because at the time it was sparsely populated and the military deemed it was the best place to fire these things without affecting large numbers of people. So that's part and parcel of being a Nevadan, is you're out in kind of the middle of nowhere.
Well, we're not for sale. The state of Nevada is not for sale. Congresswoman Berkeley will tell you that the state of Nevada is not for sale to the Nuclear Energy Institute. So, they're not elected officials. The Nuclear Energy Institute don't represent the American public. The members of Congress represent the people of America. They are but one voice in this debate. And I understand that they have a lot of clout with this administration because they've given a lot of donations to kick the door open and to make sure the door stays open to their particular policy interests. But what they're not telling is the full truth. And the full truth is we have a broken nuclear waste system. We have put all of our eggs in one very unstable basket known as Yucca Mountain. And unless something changes, that dump is never going to open.
But at the end of the day, what I'd like to see is a discussion about these things in terms of their real costs and benefits. And the cost of fossil fuel had just been swept under the rug in terms of climate change and so on. And fortunately, in a sense, that is now getting so obvious that I think it's on the table, and I think we'll hear more about it. And when there's things like nuclear waste discussed, there's a visceral reaction to that, which is really prevents a lot of true, or what's the word, sincere consideration of the relative merits of these things. And given the situation that's happening, like in the Pacific Islands and the ice caps and so on, that I want to see those brought into the debate.
Okay, so you remember how so much energy can be packed into a small amount of space. Well, it turns out nuclear energy also has much less waste than most other forms of energy, too.
The amount of waste that we're talking about is not large. A typical large power reactor is, say, 1,000 megawatt reactor. It produces about as much nuclear waste in a year as, say, would fit under this tabletop. So it's a matter of tons. It's not enormous. The total United States produces something on the order of 20,000 tons of nuclear waste per year from power reactors. That's not an enormous amount. That's a few carloads, a few railroad carloads of waste.
But in actual tonnage and actual weight, there are about 2,000 times more tons of carbon waste produced every year from fossil fuels than you get from nuclear waste. And where does that go? It's not sitting somewhere in a field or in a facility closely guarded, being processed, being controlled, protected from people, and where people are looking for a solution to disposal, and that disposal will be guarded. That waste is just going into the atmosphere. 2,000 times more than what you have sitting in terms of actual waste. Now, does that mean you ought to abandon fossil fuels and go for nuclear? That's not my point. My point is, with any technology, to students of these issues, I would say get past the slogans, weigh the risks and benefits in a fair way, make fair comparisons.
I've been very discouraged about our ability to even make progress on a problem that takes 20 to 30 years to solve. And here's my kind of antidote about that. When George Bush came into office, when he was first elected president, early in his administration, he reversed a number of regulations that the Clinton administration had put into effect for clean water. I think of, for instance, the mercury regulations. The Clinton administration had, in their last days, finally put into place stricter mercury regulations for drinking water. And we elected George Bush. He came into office, and his administration immediately reversed some of those decisions. Now, these were decisions that had been many years in the making, finally been put into place, and then a new administration reverses them. And people were very discouraged by that kind of just erasing of long environmental gains. During the campaign for the re-election that George Bush eventually was re-elected, I remember John Kerry talking about Yucca Mountain, saying that if he was elected, Yucca Mountain would never open during his year in presidency. Yucca Mountain, of course, is still not open as a nuclear storage site, but it's been in the works for probably 20 years or thereabouts. A lot of people have been working on how do we store nuclear waste in a sensible way for long periods of time, and it's the best solution that science and government have been able to come up with in this country. To think that someone would get elected and absolutely reverse a 20-year program to go forward with something because they think it's a bad idea, and because the people who elected them want them to, says something about our culture. I mean, how do you embark on any long-term program and see it to fruition if a new administration gets elected and just says, forget it, that was the wrong path? I mean, it really just makes it impossible for us to make progress on these huge energy problems like fusion, or nuclear waste storage. And it's not that these Republican or Democratic parties are fickle. It's that we as an American people are really unable to plan and buy into long-term things.
So let's go back to the fission reaction. These two very large fission byproducts end up getting